Lewis left Freetown when she was a teenager. She moved to Washington, D.C., and then to New York City. She joined millions of Black Americans leaving the South during the Great Migration, moving to where the jobs were. But she brought with her the values of Freetown. For her, it was important to buy fresh, seasonal produce directly from farmers. She became a regular at this very farmer's market. There, I met Adrienne Cheatham, James Beard-nominated chef, cookbook author, and market regular. We met here to gather ingredients for an Edna Lewis-inspired summer lunch. And when it's hot like this, you come here. What do you think?
It's wicked hot.
What are you thinking about buying?
Tomatoes to make like a nice salad, radishes, melons, things like that. It's funny, Edna Lewis in one of her books said that having a ham is like a basic black dress. So I always keep like some sort of product in my fridge so that I don't have to do too much.
That's true.
Hey, do you have the nasturtium leaves today?
Yes.
Aw, thank you. Good to see you.
Thanks for coming through. Have a great day.
You too. 2 buttermilk biscuits and 2 sourdough rolls.
With the goods secured, we headed up to Adrienne's apartment in Harlem to prepare lunch. Reading Edna's book, there are some French techniques, I think, that kind of come out. Talk to me about your background and how, there's that connection as well.
Yeah, so I really think that there's so much in common between Southern food and French cuisine. Mm-hmm. So when I went to culinary school, Adrienne, make a bechamel. And I'm like, bechamel? I was like, that's how we make mac and cheese. You melt the butter, you add the flour, then you add some milk or water, then you add the cheese and melt it. It's like, it's the exact same techniques. Right. They just have different names for it. I have a piece of some Iberico ham here. So we are just going to throw a little piece in, but we're kind of doing smothered scallions, a la Edna. She is like guiding light, and not just in food, in being a person navigating an industry where you're not that prevalent. Right. You're in an industry where people look at you like, what are you doing here? As opposed to saying you belong here. So it's like, she's like this purity of what we should all aspire to in terms of how we treat each other, how we treat food, how we treat our craft, how we treat our ingredients, where we source from. Like everything about her is just like aspirational. Shall we literally and figuratively break bread?
Yes, ma'am.
Cheers.
Cheers. Enjoying fresh produce and ham that was prepared in Edna Lewis's style made me appreciate some of the reasons that diners flocked to her restaurants. But how did a young Black woman from the South establish herself as a chef in New York City in the 1940s? I met up with author Sara B. Franklin to explore this question. Sara edited a collection of essays about Miss Lewis, and she told me what brought her to New York in the first place.
Illness befell her family. And so at a pretty young age, as a teenager, she ended up needing to leave Freetown to figure out how to make her way in the world economically, as did all of her other siblings. And so there was this sort of exodus out of Freetown. She first went to Washington, D.C. as a later teenager, and she tried her hand as a laundress and famously flopped. She was terrible at doing the wash because it's not what she had been raised to do.
Right.
But she did have a flair for style and an incredible way with a needle. And so when she eventually made her way even farther up into New York City, she had been part of the Great Migration out of the American South. She was able to make her mark first as someone who sewed beautiful clothes. She was dressing department store windows at one point. She was sewing dresses for celebrities. But she also made a name for herself as a really talented home cook. And so that's eventually how she landed her job as chef and partner. Many people don't know she was a partner at Cafe Nicholson in 1949.
So Cafe Nicholson, So this is an important moment in time for not only New York City, but for Edna Lewis as well.
Absolutely.
And so if you could set the scene for us.
So we're in Manhattan in the late 1940s, right? World War II has ended. Money is beginning to flow back into the American economy, which means people are starting to go out, which means that there's an opportunity for restaurants to begin to kind of come back onto the scene. But Cafe Nicholson is a special kind of a restaurant. It's run by Johnny Nicholson and Carl Bissinger, who were partners both romantically and in business. One a photographer, one an antiques dealer. So you can sort of imagine, right, the post-war Manhattan scene already. We've got this sort of flamboyance, this opulence in this East Side restaurant. And Edna Lewis had, again, just begun to make a reputation for herself as a cook by word of mouth in the bohemian downtown scene. She was a home cook primarily at that point. Occasionally she'd cook for some friends for a dinner party. But these two men needed a chef, right? They had the shell, they had the style, they had the flair, but they didn't know how to cook. But they did know what was good and what was delicious, and they knew that she could cook it. And very quickly, it became a real scene for the sort of literati of the New York world at the time and the hangers-on. So you have Gore Vidal coming to dinner, you have Tennessee Williams, you have Truman Capote, Eleanor Roosevelt comes to eat, Jackie Robinson comes to eat. And in the kitchen with Edna Lewis is her sister Ruth, and they are working, they're tag teaming in the kitchen, and they're doing a mix of cooking things that they learned how to cook at home. So you have a real sort of rural Virginia, French-inflected, sophisticated but home cooking, right? That really refined comfort food. So food that people want to eat but done with such excellence of execution. So you have a perfect roast chicken on the menu. But then you have Truman Capote sticking his head in the kitchen saying, well, can you make me some fried chicken and biscuits? I'm missing home. And she sort of famously would shoo him away like, that's not what I'm doing here. But as they became closer friends, on occasion she would make off-menu items for people that became regulars of the restaurant who she began to trust a little more. And because she became known as such a tremendous chef to those folks, again, pre-internet, pre-really glossy food magazine even, what you have is word of mouth. And she was so known and so beloved as such an excellent chef. But really important to counter that is she was not the face of the restaurant in the way that celebrity chefs are today. So she was not spending all of service walking around shaking hands. She was actually the working chef. The face of the restaurant was white, but the food was decidedly Southern and Black. It was making a profit off her excellent food, off her skill, her prowess, her embodied knowledge, but they weren't promoting her.
If Cafe Nicholson was an early highlight of Miss Lewis's career in food, it also reflected what it meant to be a Black woman cooking in the 1940s. In the shadows, behind the scenes. Cafe Nicholson closed more than 20 years ago, but I wanted to see the place where it all started, where Edna Lewis first wowed diners as a chef. What I found was not much. An unmarked building with no sign of its former glamour, soon to be condos. What does it mean that Edna is so hard to find? She cooked here. She made her name here. Why wasn't that enough to give it life today? I needed to talk to someone who was working hard to keep the past alive in her cooking. Someone who knows Miss Lewis's legacy well. And that's where we'll go next.